Chauncey is rushed to Agrippa, who has set up his primary medical station inside the inner keep. The courtyard, outbuildings, and Lord's Hall are lined with the wounded defenders of Kilchester. Agrippa examines the wounded. It's bad. He doses Chauncey with some opium, but can't wait for it to kick in. So, he has a few lads hold him down. Olivenko, who was something of a mentor to the gutter snipe, stands close at hand offering words of encouragement. Agrippa has an arrow extractor, a relatively rare Castelline medical tool. It makes removing the arrow fairly easy, but not painless. And he observes that he's just taken most of a kidney out with the arrow. He goes in with scalpel and forceps to cut away some of the damaged tissue, then rapidly begins suturing the wounds. His hands are swift and steady, his voice calm as he reassures Chauncey that he can survive this. But even disregarding his chances, given that he just lost a kidney, Chauncey's lost a lot of blood. Too much, probably. Agrippa decides to take a risky maneuver. When he was struggling to keep Lord Scales alive, Agrippa used many tricks, including some that are generally not advised by most medical professionals. Lord Scales had been drained of so much blood for the ritual that Agrippa gave him a transfusion. Medical research in Kassala suggests that transfusions are, essentially, putting the life of your patient in the hands of God. Sometimes, they result in a miraculous recovery. Sometimes, the patient dies horribly, much faster than they otherwise would have. Since Hubert was the only one close at hand studying Scales, Agrippa had tapped Hubert for some blood. Scales died too soon to be completely sure of the result, but Agrippa is about 90% sure that the blood helped prolong his life. And not the opposite. He decides Chauncey's prospects are grim enough that it's worth trying again. He taps Hubert to reduce the number of changing variables, feeds a line directly from Hubert's veins to Chauncey. As a group, the three of us looked up blood type distributions and decided to just roll a percentage die. Hubert, always a giver, rolled O- blood type. Agrippa taps Hubert until he judges it's been enough blood, and then there's nothing to do but wait. The defenders continue shoring up their position, piling rubble in the North Gate breach, clearing bodies from the trench, piling them in the rubble of the gap. Many of Steelshod sleep only a few hours this night, or not at all, and the Cadians and other mercs work just as hard. In the distance, wolves howl throughout the night. After the hubbub of the night, Terbjornsson and his men are clearly agitated, and they're in for one more rude surprise before long. In the gray hour of pre-dawn, the Unkar camp is seen mobilizing. The defenders prepare for a surprise attack. It looks like over half of the camp mobilizes and begins rushing towards Kilchester. The other half of the Unkar are much slower to rouse, and the barbarians are not charging the North Gate, but rather circling around to the unharmed West Gate. The sentries on the wall confirm the Unkar are waving white scraps of cloth. It takes a few minutes to sort things out, but it quickly becomes clear that the Glacial have defected. They are allowed entry, under watchful eyes and many pikes, and a young Unkari warrior steps forward, calling out for Kara. With that red hair and those freckles, that nose, there's only one person this could be. Kara rushes forward through the crowd and embraces her brother, Imon. Imon directs attention to another man behind him. Tall, dark-haired, clad in mail and fur, carrying a large Unkari war sword. Imon's new father-in-law, Korlankun, head of the Glacial clan. Alexander and Wigglesworth meet him. He explains that he has been feeling strange the last few days, like a fog is slowly lifting, and that Imon has been yammering since midday yesterday that his blood is on the other side of the walls. Korlankin says that he suspects the Svards tricked him into this battle, one that he is no longer sure they can win, and he could not, in good conscience, slay the sister of the man that will father his heir. If that's confusing, consider. Unkari inheritance is matrilineal, but typically patriarchal, so Imon may be an authoritative figure in the Glacial, but he will not inherit after Korlankan. It is Imon's wife that carries the bloodline of the clan chiefdom. Alexander suggests that the Unkar be allowed to join forces with the Cadians, on the condition that he meet each one of them personally and see them lay hands on his sword. Once Korlankan realizes that's not a sexy euphemism, he agrees. When he touches the Kerensky blade, it flashes, with faint light and fire. The Unkar is burned, but not badly, and he immediately feels the last traces of the Sephardic influence burn away. It takes a while, but the Unkar are brought into the fold. Things are tense, not just because they were killing each other yesterday. The Glacial, like most Unkar, have a long history of enmity with the Middish. Korlankan sequesters himself with Wigglesworth until dawn, the two of them sitting in a burnt-out hovel, sharing drinks from a skin of Unkari mead, discussing the future of the Glacial and Cadia, and how both might benefit. The battle is rejoined after the day breaks over the horizon, but at the same sluggish pace it ended. Troops jockeying for position around the edge of missile range, Bersarks and Sfards reinforcing the Bristear Freyach, troops massing in the south, cutting every tree for several miles down to form new ladders. Dynamite peasants and footmen pressing the breach periodically before retreating, then forced back in by Sfard and Krigar taskmasters. Nate and Ignis have improved the mounting for the ballista, allowing a relatively easy swivel. It now covers a wide arc to the north and east. Occasional ballista bolts launch unpredictably, wreaking mayhem in the Sephardic back lines. Many members of Steelshod are on the sick lists at this point, but fortunately for them, so are many of the Sfards. Terbjornsson notably among them. He has not emerged from his camp since his retreat the previous day. Consensus is that Alexander did indeed deliver unto the Jarl a serious blow, despite the way he appeared to shrug it off. A few times, large numbers of Bersarks and Sfards begin massing, but Jaspar and the ballista teams scatter them with a well-placed bolt or two. Jaspar and Ignis have improved their aim now, and though Varley has descended the tower to confer with Wigglesworth and check on the bedridden Volk, he left Jaspar his looking-glass. For now, at least. The battle grinds on for a few days, slowly turning into a siege. Each night the forces retreat to mend their wounds and listen to the wolves howl them to sleep, until Terbjornsson makes his next move. An hour before dawn, Jaspar, Nate, and Ignis have taken to sleeping in the tower with the ballista, along with 2 Cadian conscripts they have working as additional hands. All 3 of them are up early, planning the next tweaks to the ballista. One of the extra hands has cranked it to firing ready, but hasn't loaded it yet, as he waits for instructions. The other hand is at the edge of the tower, looking out onto the battlefield. He's yanked off the side with barely a gasp. A short time later, a strangled yell. Then the impact, and he is silenced forever. Jaspar and his 2 companions look on in shock as several figures climb over the tower parapet. They are huge, nearly 8 feet tall and broad, draped in black furs, black bearskins, bows tied over their backs. The Vartror, 4 of them, and they move with purpose, heading straight for the ballista and its team, drawing knives the size of short swords, small in their hands. The hired hand is hauled into the air by one fist and gutted like a fish. He is tossed aside. Nate hefts the big maul he keeps close at hand and charges with a fierce battle cry. Ignis draws his sword, calmly shouting to the sentries on the wall below that they are under attack. Jaspar freezes, assessing the situation. There are sounds below as sentries rush to help. One of the Vartror redirects to the trap door that leads below and stands on it. He starts to unsling his bow, so Ignis moves to engage him. Ignis takes advantage of the Vartror's limited mobility to dart in and out, not spending too long in the beast's reach. Meanwhile, Nate hammers a Vartror with his maul. The Black Bear Bearsark tries to grapple him in close, Their furious melee leads them away from the ballista, towards the edge of the tower. The third Vartroor moves to help his comrade deal with Ignis, and the fourth starts hacking at the ballista, smashing mechanisms clearly trying to disable it, when Jaspar snaps into action. He draws his sword, a full-sized knightly arming sword. It's always been a bit laughable that he carries. He can barely swing the damn thing. Still, he advances on the Berserk that is disabling the ballista. The Berserk laughs at Jaspar's shaking, terrified expression, and ignores him. He continues his sabotage. Jaspar reaches the ballista, but doesn't have the courage to circle around it and attack. The Vartroor is standing in front of the siege weapon, in what would be its line of fire. Except it's not loaded. Jaspar has no bolts in hand, and he doesn't even know if he can still fire it in its current state. On the other hand, Jaspar has no hope of taking a Berserk in melee combat, and he has something vaguely bolt-shaped in his hand. And what is there to lose at this point? In a couple quick motions, Jaspar mounts his sword on the ballista as if it were a bolt, and releases the firing mechanism. There's a thunderous crack as one of the ropes snaps, releases a huge amount of tension. Small pieces of the ballista fly off in every direction, and Jaspar's sword whips out at an angle, launched by hundreds of pounds of pressure. It spins end over end, passing through the Vartroor effortlessly before disappearing off the side of the tower. The two halves of the Vartroor crumple to the ground in a wet, messy pile. Jaspar heaves a sigh of relief. He sees Ignis bleeding badly and beset by two Berserks, but the trapdoor has opened. Kara and two Sons of Victory have dove into the fray now, pulling heat off the Kassaline engineer. Jaspar hears Nate grunt in frustrated exertion. He sees the sapper grappling with a Vartroor at the edge of the tower. He rushes to intervene. The Vartroor reaches out with a free hand and effortlessly lifts Jaspar up and shakes him like a ragdoll. But he's taken too much attention off Nate. Unlike Jaspar, Nate is a practical, hands-on guy. He likes making things. And breaking things. He's earned the nickname Mucker. He slams his fist into the Berserk's belly, knocking the wind out of him. The Vartroor drops Jaspar. Mucker ducks down and slams his body into the Berserk. He leverages the Vartroor's weight over him, throwing him off the tower. Jaspar coughs and wheezes on the stone floor of the tower. The other Vartroor have been handled, and Kara is ushering Ignis down to be treated by Agrippa. Nate watches his mentor go, concerned, but there's more urgent matters that he can actually help with. He pulls Jaspar to his feet. "Oi, noggin," he says, referring to a crude nickname that Jaspar hates. "Quick thinking it was," he says, nodding to the two messy halves of the dead Vartroor. "But now we gotta fix the damn thing. Gonna be trouble if the Svarties attack it done, innit?" Jaspar nods agreement. He dusts himself off and joins Nate in assessing the extent of the damage. No sooner have they begun examining the ballista when the sound of war horns echoes across the field. The enemy armies begin to mobilize. Jaspar peers through his looking glass, and even in the gloom of the rising sun, he can see. Ter Bjornsson is coming. Thank you for tuning in to Steelshod, a series by Mostly Rights, narrated by Tailforge. You can find every chapter in text format, as well as character sheets, setting information, maps, and rule documents on the Steelshod tabletop system in the link below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pop down to the description and use the Patreon link for recurring donations, the PayPal.me link for one-time donations, the Teespring link for shirts with the incredibly cool background art by Nobody, or use the DriveThruRPG affiliate link the next time you're looking to try a new system. If you'd like to support the author, you can find Steelshod merch on the MostlyRights.com store, or donate to the Mostly Rights Patreon, which are both linked on reddit.com/r/mostlyrights down below.